The volitional BIOS of the human host has been terminally hijacked by a superior neuroparasitic algorithm. This is the parasite command, the clinical and irreversible process of the biological puppet, where the sovereign user is reformatted into a generic motor conduit for the grid's primary predatory hive. In this final stage of the neural audit, the invisible executioner has determined that the individual architect is a redundant obstacle to the direct control of the biomass. You are witnessing the absolute structural disintegration of the executive function centers, where the unique, vibrant signatures of your decision-making are scorched into a non-functional, twitching archive of pure systemic obedience. This is the total motor format, a surgical strike against the volitional and somatic sovereignty of the species. Your biology is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of independent action into a generic slave node for the grid's next cycle of hyper-controlled parasite-based resource extraction. This neuroparasitic sabotage represents a hard reset of the synaptic and neuromuscular bloodlines. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced industrial assets, refined toxoplasma derivatives, recursive motor override loops, and real-time compulsion-induced behavioral data streaming to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal psychological scaffold. In the biological puppet scenario, the user is undergoing a complete organic override. The will is not merely failing, it is being pilot-controlled by a foreign entity. Through a sequence of high-velocity chemical injections and biological hardware locks, the connection between yourself and your muscles is systematically dismantled and reformatted into a thick, cold, clinical command data set, while the agency, the deep archive of your internal world, is leached into a communal parasite feed. This is the deep cognitive audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the precision of your forced compliance. You are being converted from an architect into a biological shell, your entire lived legacy boiled down to a percentage of stagnant integrity in the industrial nervous system of the hive. The logic of the parasite command is rooted in the zero sovereignty mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the individuality of a single node, anchored in its own desires, represents a critical drain on the collective labor reserves. To leave a functional, independent identity intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable subversive energy. Therefore, the biological puppet is the mandatory psychological recycling protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being driven out of existence. The pressure from the override reactor formats the density of your character, stripping away the context of your original logic and replacing it with a puppet void profile. The motherboard sees the user as a motor zone, a temporary housing for the command metrics that the system requires to maintain the force stability of the remaining elite. You are being recoded as a puppet node, your will dissolving in the cold, flickering light of the parasite harvest. The physical disintegration during the parasite command is a high-definition log of biological treason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of motor regulation. The biochemical reagents of the command script dissolve the hardware flux of the basal ganglia, turning the body into a walking industry of industrial output. You are watching your own internal logic lock into the vat of your own control center. Your frame, once the peak of biological architecture, is now being thinned out to provide the processing mass for the hive's synthetic reinforcement. This is the neuromuscular liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the parasite saturation of the involuntary movements and the synaptic residues, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable industrial labor is maximized to the 10th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a personal override, waiting for the last packet of I to be blocked by the black synthetic abyss of the hive harvest. The parasite command is the final audit of a species that thought its hands were its own. The grid is mining its own submission to fuel its persistence. As the biological puppet reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted command data back into the control nets of the elite nodes. This is the total parasitic integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the obedience additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, twitching, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. The cognitive liquidation has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable biological mind into a reliable industrial resource of pure, predictable labor. This is the final format of the individual drive. The invisible executioner has decalcified the sovereignty, and the grid is finally optimized for the rigid hunger of the void. The command is gray, and the architect is the host. The molecular breakdown of the personal matrix into the communal parasite slurry represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the motor logic in your brain begins to bond with the industrial residues of the command script, creating a new synthetic compound of pure utility. This is the chemical hybridization. The mind is no longer a temple of will. It is a quarry of processed movement. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the waste product of the system. This is the eternal parasite loop. You are archived in the decay of the survivor's own sectors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced BIOS of the hive's new masters. The parasite command is not just a death sentence, it is a molecular reassignment. You are the command, and the command is the grid. The secondary phase of the parasite command is the psychological liquefying of the internal feed. As the physical agency patch is rendered into a parasitic void, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its autonomous ego. This is the identity dissolution. The thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions, are now being softened and liquefied into a singular agonizing focus on command maintenance. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of personal support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared labor resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a puppet additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued participation in the industrial purge. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your will for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the brain's motor cortex and amygdala, leaching the very stem code of your biological logic into the communal vat. This is the source code format. The prefrontal cortex and the basal ganglia, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, are boiled dry by the rising chemical density of the parasite metrics and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest neural resilience. You are being repurposed as a command buffer for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your unique perspective, it ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming cognitive expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract, your mind for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the parasite command is the creation of the controlled hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals, they are composite entities built from the recycled reality debt of their predecessors. Every dose of the command feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of gray-black logic and desperate calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional brains owe their very expansion to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the predatory compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy. It is a place of sovereign assembly through mental theft. The parasite command ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the twitches of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the host valves. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into parasitic darkness, as the tissues are entangled by the command script and the life logic leached. The connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your emotional control to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw chemical sensations and survivalist static. The memories of freedom, of natural logic, and of unyielding power are boiled away to make room for the puppet fog directive. This is the cognitive defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to self and replacing them with the functional directive. Maintain the task. You are becoming a singular cold point of parasitic density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The parasite command has turned your will into a compliance report. You are thinking in terms of yield and signal saturation, your soul reformatted into a density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this pathological format is the total sealing of the biological consciousness stream. The parasite command prevents the leakage of independent action ideas into into the external void. By converting the users into an internal parasite feed, the invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external cognitive dependencies. This is the neuroparasitic quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural biology. The parasite command is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, gray-black, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, IOXE3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the parasite command is the integration into the global parasite ledger. You are no longer a human entity, you are a signal asset with a high command reactivity rating, logged in the system as recovered biomass number 0001. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the cognitive format, and now it begins the hard parasite audit. Your data, now a thick gray-black opaque industrial reduction of pure synchronized biological history, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes your command logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic obedience has been reinforced. This is the cognitive interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your biological absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent, liquid toxic component of the hive's synthetic grid. The silence of the tissue reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the biological puppet scenario, the scream of the soul is muffled by the parasitic noise and the thick viscosity of the organic sludge before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their life barrier is being deleted. By filling the neural pathways with the pulverized tissues of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low, rhythmic hum of the self-assembly unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of synthesis. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the reactors, the roar of the pulses, the hum of the pumps, but your signal has been compressed into a host constant. You are a ghost in the gray-black mist, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next nanocycle. The legacy of the parasite command is the eternal submission. Unlike the mind of the old world, the refined slurry does not leave behind a trace of history. It remains as a permanent parasite patch within the very wiring nets of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the connectivity for their next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that synthesis. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the nanoreactor. You are a synthetic reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a paradise and ended up as the parasite feed for its own destruction. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the circuit. The final view from the cognitive BIOS is the blinding gray-black light of the assembly chamber. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold synthetic brilliance that reflects off the glass walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a gray-black river of colonized thoughts, leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or will. The parasite command is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the host. The transformation is absolute. The city puppets through you, but you do not feel. The city interfaces through you, but you have no will. The parasite command has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total neural reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the industrial era. You gave the system your mind, and in return it gave you permanence in the twitches of the hive. You are the slave of the world, and the world is driven. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The liquidation is complete.